We welcome anyone who comes to America, regardless of your race, regardless of your history, regardless of your wealth, as long as you're willing to assimilate into America, into the melting pot, okay? That's the first idea. Second idea is fairness. And the third is clarity. So in other words, people are willing to play a game and work really hard to win this game if, first of all, they can play this game, they're allowed to play this game, they're not discriminated against. Also, if the rules are really clear, okay, you understand what the rules are. In America, the rules are very simple. You go to America, you follow the law, you work really hard, you get rich, okay? Really simple, it's called the American dream, right? And the third thing, of course, is that the game is fair. Meaning, the only criterion to generate wealth is how hard you work, how much talent you have, how much merit you have, right? The idea of merit. Okay? And look, this is true. When you go to America, you will discover this. If you work really hard, if you're really talented, if you're really smart, they will respect that, okay? I've been to a lot of countries, and I can tell you that in America, this is true. But it's not true in Canada. I grew up in Canada, and they don't really care if you're ambitious. They really don't care if you're smart. They don't care if you work hard. They don't care. They expect you to follow the rules and conform, okay? That's Canada. You go to China, okay? We all know what China is, okay? No one cares if you work hard. No one cares if you're smart. No one cares, okay? It's all about your guanxi, about your family, okay? But it's true for, actually, this is true for most of the world. And I would say that the idea of merit is only true for two places. America is the most obvious example, okay? I've been to meetings where at first Americans are like, this guy's Chinese, he doesn't speak any English, and he's not that smart, okay? So there's discrimination going on. But the moment I speak, the moment I try to make my case, they are won over by my logic, okay? By my arguments, by my creativity. And they welcome me into the club. That's just the American attitude of being open-minded, of being generous, of appreciating talent above everyone else, okay? The English are also very similar in that way, in that, yeah, maybe they're racist, but if you can make a good argument in front of them, they will accept your argument, okay? But guess what, guys? Nowhere else is this true, okay? In China, you have the best argument in the world. No one cares, right? Okay, so there are lots of issues with America, but in all honesty, America is a place that really does appreciate merit and which really does reward merit. And that's why everyone wants to go to America. All right? All right, so the question then is, how did America create this system? Okay, well, it did so through the Constitution. The idea of the Constitution is to create a game and make this game above power, okay? And how they did that is creating a system of government that checks and balances each other. So you have the president, you have the Congress, okay? And you have the Supreme Court. Okay, the Supreme Court, it's very simple. It's to interpret the Constitution, which is the highest law in the land, okay? And then the powers of the government are divided equally amongst these different branches. So the Congress can create laws and control spending, okay? Or what's called the purse. The president has war powers, basically, or the sword. Okay? But if the president were to declare war, he needs Congress to approve, because Congress has to give the money to start the war. Okay? And the idea that the Constitution is the highest law in the land means that it's really rule of law. Okay? So even though you have this government system in place, you also have another parallel system called the judiciary, the court system, which protects property rights in the same way that they do in Britain. Okay? Does that make sense? So the very idea is that this is a game, and the government is a system to maintain the openness, clarity, and fairness of the game. And because of this, America was very quickly able to dominate the world. Okay? The thing about this game, okay, that's very important for us to understand is it is expansionist. Okay? So what happened is that in its history, America faced certain challenges to this game, and this game won out every single time, okay? So the first major challenge to this game is called the American Civil War. All right, so let me explain what happened. From 1861 to 1864, the Civil War was fought between the North and the South. This was a clash of economic systems, okay? So the North played the game, okay? And so we believed in free labor. The South was its own independent economic system that focused on agriculture. And so it used slave labor. For many Americans in the North, slave labor was offensive because it corrupted the game, okay? Because remember, America was founded on the idea of openness, fairness, and clarity. But if you're a slave, that's not fair, okay? Because you were born a slave and you can never participate in this game. And so they fought a civil war to decide who will triumph in the end. And of course, the North won because the North focused on free labor. So that meant that there were more people in the North. That meant that the North was wealthier because of manufacturing. And that meant that the North were more energetic. Okay? So they defeated the South. And so that was the first major challenge. Now the game is spreading. Okay? It spreads across America. And now it stops because America can't expand anymore. Okay? It basically conquers the West. And now the game is an issue because of the nature of money. The problem with money is that ultimately, the longer you play this game, at the end of the game, one person controls all the money. Okay, does that make sense? That's a problem with capitalism. That's a problem with this game. So now that the frontier has been settled, now that the borders have been controlled, a few people are now controlling all the money, which leads to the Great Depression, okay? So now the solution is America has to go and conquer the world, which it does, okay? In World War II, America conquers the world. And so now what America needs to do is spread this game throughout the world. And it does that by creating the US dollar, okay? So 1945, America wins the war. A year before, in July 1944, for 1 month, what happens is that America organizes something called the Bretton Woods Conference in New Hampshire, okay? And the idea of the Bretton Woods Conference is to establish the world game, okay? Before, America's game was limited to America, but now America wants to scale its game to the entire world, okay? So how does it do that? Well, first thing it does is it makes the US dollar the reserve currency of the world. All right? What does that mean? It means that every other currency has to be derived from the US dollar. Every other currency will find value from the US dollar. Okay? Which means that if you have Canadian dollars, you can now change it for US dollars, which is what's valuable. The Canadian dollars is just not valuable, okay? All right. They also agree on exchange rate. Okay. Okay, does it make sense? Okay, and this is a system that we have today. Okay. All right. The global reserve currency is the U.S. dollar. That's what's valuable. The renminbi derives its value from its relationship with the U.S. dollar. The renminbi is not valuable by itself. Okay. All right. That's number one. Okay. So now you're like, wait a minute here. If this is true, then the US dollar the Americans can just print as much money as they want. And so to solve this problem, the Americans said, the US dollar will be pegged to gold. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, meaning like you can always take your US dollar and change it for gold. And because there's a limit to gold, there has to be a limit to the US dollars, which keeps the system stable. Okay? All right, that's number one. Number two is America needs to expand this game, okay? Because it is in competition with the Soviet Union, which is against this game, okay? So it creates two new organizations to spread the game throughout the world. And these two organizations are called the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, okay? So, for the sake of simplicity, okay, understand this. The World Bank, their job is to give you loans. Okay, so let's say you are China and you are poor, right? And you need to build dams. Well, the World Bank gives you money. And when it gives you money, what it does is it allows you to start playing this game, okay? It allows you to participate in this game. Now, what always happens is eventually the countries borrow so much money, they have to go into debt and they can't pay off the money, right? So then what happens is the IMF comes in and changes your government and its economic policies to make it conform more to the game. Okay, does that make sense? And its main mechanism is called privatization. All right? So what the IMF says is, okay, well, you're inefficient. You can't pay off the debt because you're inefficient. You're inefficient because the public should not be control of the infrastructure. The public should not be in control of water, okay? Private companies should be in charge of the water and electricity and the land, okay? So the goal of the World Bank and the IMF is to spread the game throughout the world, all right? Okay, then in 1947, they create something called the GATT, okay? The GATT is a General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. So this is the WTO basically, okay? That's changed into the WTO in 1995. All right? So it's basically an agreement on free trade. Right? Does that make sense? 1973. SWIFT. SWIFT is an agreement amongst different banks in the world on how to transfer money. Okay? So, for example, if you want to transfer money from China, RMB, into America to go to university, right? Guess what, guys? It has to go through SWIFT, okay? So now it allows for more cooperation among banks in the world to use US dollars, all right? Now, the last thing is, okay, how do these countries get together and decide on how to cooperate economically? And the answer is the Bank of International Settlements, okay? Okay, and the idea is that the central banks of different countries get together and they agree on certain policies, all right? And this is all done privately, in secret. No one knows about them, okay? All right, so this is the game that America creates. It's very simple, okay? And there are other components, but we'll focus on this now. Throughout the semester, we will focus on how this game is played specifically, but first I just introduce it to you, all right? Okay, so now let's talk about how the US dollar conquers the world. All right, so for the longest time, this system works well, okay? The United States is in competition with the Soviet Union. But over time, the Americans start to abuse this system. So they pay for things they can't really pay for. For example, the war in Vietnam. For example, a space race. For example, something called the Great Society. Okay? They're just spending too much money. And other countries start to freak out. So France basically withdraws all its gold from the United States. So in 1971, what Nixon does is say, you know what? Here's the secret, guys. We actually don't have enough gold to pay off everyone, okay? So screw this. We're not going to peg the gold, the dollar to gold anymore, okay? Do you understand? You can now no longer redeem your US dollars for gold. It's done, okay? So now what happens is the US dollar becomes a Ponzi scheme, all right? What is a Ponzi scheme? A Ponzi scheme is basically the US dollar is valuable because people want to use it. Do you understand? It has no value in itself. It's only valuable because people want to use it.